Hello, my name's Dr. Gillian Ray-Barruel and I'm a Senior Research Fellow with QE2 Hospital and Griffith University. And today I'm going to present to you Essentials of Evidence-Based Practice, Part 2, Formulating a Research Question and Planning Your Project. So formulating your research question is done using the PICO format. P stands for participants. So who are you going to be interested in studying? I is the intervention. What are you going to be studying? C is the comparison. What are you comparing your intervention to? O stands for outcomes. What are you going to be measuring? What are you expecting to see and how are you going to measure it? And T is timeline. How long is this going to take, this research? I'll give you some examples. Can listening to music for 20 minutes before bedtime improve sleep quality, quantity and mood in registered nurses working shift work? Well, the participants would be registered nurses working shifts. The intervention would be listening to music via headphones for 20 minutes before bedtime. Comparison would be usual care, therefore no bedtime music. The outcomes would be improved sleep quality, quantity and mood. And time frame, I'd like to look at this over a month. So here's another example. Can post-pyloric tube feeds reduce the incidence of aspiration pneumonia in ventilated ICU patients? And here my participants are my ventilated patients. My intervention is my post-pyloric tube feeds. My comparison would be usual practice or nasogastric tube feeds. My outcomes, I'm hoping to reduce the incidence of aspiration pneumonia, and my time frame would need to be a bit longer than the last study, so I'll make it 6 months. How long you make it depends on how much money you've got, how many resources you have, etc. But I'll get to that. So that's the PICO format. It's quite simple. And once you have your PICO, you know who, what, where, when you want to do your project. It's then time to plan. And you can't go past some good resources on the QEPS website. This is the Princess Alexandra Hospital Nursing Practice Development Unit research webpage. They have some excellent resources here, most particularly this project plan template. Now, using a project plan template is terrific because it spells out exactly how to get started with your research and what needs to be covered. This is an example of a template. It's several pages long, but it steps you through exactly what you need to do, what you need to consider before you even begin your project. And a research proposal or a project plan must include all of these things. Obviously a title, an introduction saying what the research is going to be about. It's important to have some background or some literature review. You need to be able to identify that no one else has already done this project, or if they have, why would you want to do it again? You need to identify where the gap is in the evidence that your research is trying to fill. You would need a hypothesis. So what are you hoping to see? What are you expecting? For example, with the post-pyloric tube feeds, we were hoping to see a decreased incidence of aspiration pneumonia in ventilated ICU patients. So my hypothesis would be that post-pyloric tube feeds can reduce the incidence of aspiration pneumonia in ventilated ICU patients. And the purpose of the research, well, why is this a problem? Why does it deserve to be studied? And then you could cite the statistics on aspiration pneumonia, for instance. So the aim, so I'm going to do a randomised controlled trial of my post-pyloric tube feeds versus my nasogastric tube feeds, etc. And what I hope to see reduced incidence of aspiration pneumonia. Why is this significant? Well, as I said, because you quote some statistics on what the consequences of aspiration pneumonia, prolonged morbidity, mortality, length of stay, cost to the organisation, cost to the patient, etc. The study design or methods that I'm going to use, well, I've just told you that I've decided on a randomised control design. I want to compare two groups and I'll have to randomise those patients to the groups. I will need ethics for this project. I'll need ethics approval and governance approval for the project. Sample, how many patients would I need to include in my proposal? Well, that will depend on how significant I want my findings to be. So there are sample size calculators online. If I want to be absolutely sure, then I'm going to need a larger sample. And sample size calculators and the Metro South statistician can help you decide on how many people need to be in your sample. Data collection, what tools am I going to use? Am I collecting this data on paper? Am I collecting it on a website? Who's going to analyse it? How will it be analysed? Who's going to write up the project and then disseminate the findings? So is this going to be a peer-reviewed publication in a high-ranking journal, or is this going to be a poster presentation at a Queensland Health Nursing Forum? Is this going to be an online video such as this one, or is it going to be put on LinkedIn or Twitter, for instance? Where are you going to disseminate these findings? What resources will you need for this study? And where are you going to get the money? How much is it going to cost? Where's the money coming from? And of course you need a reference list which demonstrates that you have seriously done some background reading and you know exactly the state of play and why this research is important. And you might ask, well, how do I know which research methods to use? And that depends on several things. It depends on what you want to know, how much money or resources do you have, how much time do you have, how much support do you have, do you have a team to help you, or are you trying to run this research project by yourself? And what experience or skills do you have at doing research? Have you run a randomised controlled trial before? Because if not, you're certainly going to need to tap into somebody who has, because there's a lot involved and you'll need some guidance. To fund your research, there are competitive grants available, and these may be large project grants or partnership grants, or as small as conference travel grants. So after you've already done your research, you could put in for a conference travel grant to get some money for an airfare to go and present your research in another city, might pay for your accommodation and your conference registration, for instance. So that's always a good way to get started on funding. There are also things like fellowship schemes for researchers, nursing scholarships, very popular for nursing research, donations. You might be lucky enough to have some company make a unrestricted donation to your research. But you can also use things such as in-kind support. And in-kind support includes things like, well, you won't have to pay for meeting rooms for your research, or you won't have to pay for a computer because that will be provided by your organisation. The data collection tools are already available to you, and perhaps the clinical facilitator is willing and has some time to help you collect your data, for instance. So that's called in-kind support. But you do need to specify in your budget how you're going to spend the money. So what are you going to use the money for? And this might be, you might need to pay for a research assistant, or you might have in-kind support for your research. You also need to consider your project timeline, because research is not something that's done super quickly. It needs to be measured and considered, and you will need to come up with a Gantt chart such as this to show when you're going to achieve your milestones for your project. So the project timeline would include things such as the research proposal and preparation, getting your ethics and governance applications approved. Don't underestimate how long that can take. Oftentimes you put something into ethics and they have questions, and so it can take a couple of months to get your ethics and governance approvals completed. Data collection is going to take you probably at least a couple of months, depending on what you're trying to research. Data analysis will also take some time, and writing the report will also take time. And then trying to get the report published or approved, and then planning your presentations and your dissemination of your report. This also needs to be considered. When you write up your results, there is a formula for this called IMRD, and that stands for the introduction, why did you do it, including a literature review. Method, how did you do it? Results, what did you find? And then a discussion. So what? Why did this matter? What did you find? What does it now contribute to the field that you have plugged the gap? And then a conclusion. So if you follow this scheme, you will find it much, much easier to write up your results. And disseminating your research, as I said, you could be doing publications for peer-reviewed journals, but you could also do publications for trade magazines and hospital newsletters. You could be doing presentations, and this can range from anything from a keynote invited plenary speaker, or an oral abstract presentation, or a poster. Social media, it's essential now to get your research out there on social media, so you need to promote it on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook. Just get it out there. If you've got an academic media outlet, then use it. These are things such as ResearchGate, Academia EDU. And if you really have a great research project, then why not put out a media release? Queensland Health, or if you're with the university, will be happy to help you write a media release for your extraordinary results that you really want to promote. And then if it's a really big study, you might even end up on TV or radio or the newspaper. So there's lots of ways to disseminate your research. And don't forget word of mouth, that's also important. The QE2 Nursing Research Support Service offers several upcoming workshops, so please consider enrolling for these via Leap Online. The next one will be Essentials of Literature Reviews, followed by Getting Started with Your Research Project, and Publishing and Presenting Your Research. But don't worry, if you miss out on attending any of these workshops, all of them will be recorded and posted online after they've happened. For further information, visit the QE2 Nursing Research Support Service webpage, register for an upcoming research workshop on LEAP Online, attend a drop-in session offered each fortnight in the QE2 fifth floor library, speak to our friendly QE2 library staff, Jane and Meredith, or you can email me, gillian.ray-barruel@health.queensland.gov.au. Thanks for listening.